My name is Karsten Witt. I'm the promoter of the concert on the 9th of May at the Berlin Philharmonie, in which we not only play a very beautiful musical program, but we also have a speaker. It's the opening concert of a new series called Great Classics. Actually, it's great classics from the last century, from the 20th century. And we have decided that each time we include a speaker who speaks about something relevant. So not about music, or at least not only about music. The idea is that we build a bridge to the real life, because we are convinced that this is actually the aim of composers also. It's not only about their inner life and their emotions and so on. It's actually their way of making a statement in our common world. And this is what we want our speaker to do in words. So there we are. This time I have the pleasure to speak to David Rothenberg, whom we have invited. David, actually, to be honest, I found you through the internet because I was looking for somebody who can talk about birds and bird song and what do birds actually do when they sing. This was the question because actually I didn't know much about it, but one of the pieces, as you know, which we play on our program is Messiaen, Réveil des oiseaux. Messiaen was very interested in birds, and so I thought we should all know a little bit more about it. David, perhaps to start, could you perhaps tell us a little bit? You are philosopher, which means you are teaching at a university?
Yes, my name is David Rothenberg. I'm a professor of philosophy and music at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, which is very close to New York. It's right across the Hudson River from New York City, so right next to New York. And this school, it's a kind of a technical university. So I'm teaching students who mostly are not studying music. They're studying engineering, architecture, business, computers. And in America, you study that stuff. You also have to study some philosophy and some arts and other things to get some kind of a well-rounded education. But the reason why it's a good place to teach is that you're talking to regular people about sometimes abstract, complicated things. You have to make it real and clear. You have to make it relevant to not the specialists, but to everyone else, which is, of course, a great challenge, a great kind of thing to do. And it's a perfect audience to test out ideas like, why do birds sing? What does music have to do with the natural world? Now, in my work as a philosopher and also composer and musician, I'm very interested in what we can learn from nature. What happens when you think of nature as this vast musical composition, like a world of music around you? And this has kind of informed my work for many years. I've written books on this topic, published in different languages. I've played a lot of music together with birds and whales and insects, composed pieces for ensembles based on this. And yet the whole thing is motivated, I think, by a philosophical interest, a philosophical approach that begins with the idea that the natural world is intelligible. We can make sense of nature. And of course, we're used to science telling us how to make sense of nature. You study it, you analyze it, you collect data, and you draw conclusions. But if you think nature is a source of music, it's intelligible in a whole different way.
So your interest in birds came from your interest in the music which they are making, I understand, yeah?
Mostly, yes. Although as a little kid, I was interested in wandering around in nature and listening and paying attention. But I got more interested in them when I realized that you could learn from their music. You know, I knew that in most human languages, at least some of the sounds of birds were called songs all over the world. People recognize that that's like bird music. This is a bird call. That's like the bird is saying something, but this is a bird song. The bird is singing something. And this is not just in Europe, it's all over the world. This idea exists. People got a sense that there was something musical about what these birds were doing. But what exactly is musical about certain bird sounds? bird call is a sound with a specific meaning, like, hey, I'm hungry, or get away, this is my area. Caw, or when the birds, like people, sometimes use sound together, talking with each other, trying to get a message across. But this other kind of sound they're making is like the same stylized pattern repeated over and over and over again. Like the sissiu of the chaffinch, which possibly is a buckfink in German, something like that, common bird. And then the Nachtigall, the nightingale, this bird sings long, complicated phrases for hours. And very complicated, hundreds of them. And yet, if you analyze what the purpose of those sounds are, it's the same. The function is the same. The male birds are usually making those sounds. They're trying to attract a mate or defend a territory. The function is very clear. What's different is the music, the way they do it. And that's why I think, even though you don't have to go through these analytical steps, this is why people recognize these things are more like songs. And they are to be understood that way. And so if you just focus on the function, you miss the music, what's actually going on. You don't understand what they're really doing. You've kind of explained it away. Here, right around me, you can't hear them, but I can hear them. There's chickadees. These are like little black and white birds, tits in Europe, the great tit, the cold tit is like a chickadee. Chickadees make 25 different sounds. They're very understood by people. They've been studied a lot. Chickadee, chickadee, dee, 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 that's kind of their call. But the song is 2 notes. They go, doo, doo. The chickadee has more complicated calls than it has songs. And why is that one called the song? Because that's the male bird making this one sound to get a mate interested and announce its territory. But the difference, the vast diversity of the sounds these birds are making is in the different aesthetics. And what you say, how could I talk about aesthetics in birds and animals? Isn't that people developing a sense of beauty and refinement and culture? How dare you say birds do things like that? Well, the idea goes back at least as far as Charles Darwin, probably further, because Darwin recognized that when he was developing the theory of evolution, survival of the fittest, survival of certain features that made life more efficient and useful for different animals, explaining the diversity of what's out there, how it got there. He also noticed animals had a lot of weird stuff that wasn't particularly useful, like peacocks carrying around these huge, beautiful tails. This is not a smart thing to do. It's difficult to be a peacock. You have this huge tail. You have to display it with all these colors. That is not fit in any basic sense. It's unfit. It's excessive. It's crazy. Evolution seemed to also be producing that kind of stuff. And so he had to develop another theory, the theory of aesthetic selection or sexual selection, by which females just decide they like birds with a little more ornate tails. And over the generations, they got more and more excessive. And presumably something like that worked with nightingales, more and more excessive songs. They just wanted more and more and more.
Amazing is the preciseness. Yeah. I mean, they can precisely repeat their song without any mistake or something. Yeah. And that's really amazing. If you think about it, I mean, if you get a child to say something and then you say it once more, he or she will probably say something slightly different. Right. You normally need some musician to accompany children to show them what it means to, make the same sound once more and not something slightly different. But for these birds, it seems to be natural. Yeah.
Well, they learn it. Bird songs are learned. They can't just do it on their own. They have to learn from adult birds. And the fact that birds learn to sing is one of the amazing discoveries of biology in the latter half of the 20th century, to really study song learning. And the fact that, they're learning with sound. This is called vocal learning. People can do that. Kids will learn to talk. They will learn to sing. But our closest primate relatives will not. Chimpanzees, bonobo apes, they do not learn with sound. You cannot teach them to talk, only in Planet of the Apes. They're smart. They can communicate with us with sign language. They don't have vocal learning. And yet we have like 99% the same DNA as a chimpanzee. What's the difference? There's things in the brain of a songbird closer to the human brain than the chimpanzee's brain because of this vocal learning. And that's why there's thousands of biologists, many in Berlin in particular, studying the brains of songbirds, because we want to know, how does vocal learning work?
This brings me to your latest book, or I don't know, maybe one of your latest books, which is Nightingales in Berlin. And so you have obviously been in Berlin before without me knowing. And you will come back here a few days before our concert. You're also at this Haus der Kulturen der Welt, where, which will be about the Nightingales in Berlin. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit what's so specific about nightingales. It seems that they have much more songs, yeah, than other birds.
Yeah, maybe you've heard the phrase, extremes make bad examples in life. If something is extreme, it's a bad example for everyone else. But in nature, in evolution, extremes make the most interesting examples, like the peacock's tail, totally out of control. Like the nightingale, it's a bird with hundreds of different phrases in its songs, or hundreds of different separate songs, if you want to see it that way. Why does such a thing exist? Because they evolved a way of life that requires a lot of competition with singing. They're singing when other birds are quiet at night. They have an elaborate ritual singing back and forth with each other. And this is a wonderful thing to experience. And nightingales don't exist in North America. We don't have any birds that do this. I had heard of people listening to nightingales in Berlin and saying, isn't it amazing this bird is singing in the middle of all this noise at night in the city? And I thought I would go to Berlin and spend a semester, a year away living there and learn about these nightingales and play music with them. It's not only does this bird have a beautiful, complex song, but they interact with other sounds. They leave space. Nightingale sings a phrase and he waits. Is he going to hear another nightingale or some other sound? So they're leaving space for you or another bird to join in. Of course, mostly they're interested in other birds, but they're not uninterested in other sounds. The nightingale doesn't shy away when someone is playing a clarinet or a violin or singing with them. He doesn't say, I'm going somewhere else. This is annoying. He stays there and engages. And that's very unusual.
So, David, we are very much looking forward to meeting you at the Philharmonie on the 9th of May. And
yeah, I'm looking forward to being there.
Yeah. On the 5th is your event at the Haus der Kulturen der Welt, and following this at midnight, you are going to the Tiergarten. So I suppose if it's not raining too much, I don't know. But there will be an excursion and a meeting with nightingales. Maybe you can just tell us why. I mean, they are starting at midnight, the nightingales.
Sometimes we go out and do this and you have to wait longer and they don't start until 1 a.m. And that sometimes people don't like that, but sometimes people, appreciate that you just have to wait until it all starts. And I find that every time we go out and do this, surprising things happen. It's never what you expect. It's not like it's going to work this way or that way. There are always surprises between people, birds, nature. And I think, as you said earlier, you're absolutely right. These things are going on around us and people don't pay enough attention to them. And they often don't notice it. There's so much that we can learn from the world around us, nature, and also the human environment, if we just pay more attention, which is, of course, the gospel of artists, poets, writers, musicians, composers, those who are sensitive to what's going on around us that might seem obvious and ordinary, but they just go for it. They just take the time and notice and pay attention. And that's, I think, what this work fundamentally is about, listening to what's already right here. Not so hard to find, but just taking it a little more seriously than maybe people are telling us we're supposed to.
Thank you very much, David.